The following presentation was recorded at the 2025 Southeast Linux Fest in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is licensed under a Creative Commons license. For more information on the Southeast Linux Fest, visit www.southeastlinuxfest.org. Come join us next June.
Hi, my name is Leander Hutton. Some of you have seen me talk already yesterday or today. I'm a photographer, Linux user, astronomer, and also a volunteer firefighter. And yes, that's all real. I'm probably somewhere on the spectrum given how interested I get in a lot of different things. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is a talk on kind of a postmortem, not really postmortem, after action is what we'll call it, on what worked technology-wise during Hurricane Helene, what did not work, and kind of some ideas and some changes and things that I'm looking at and in terms of that and preparations. I want to set a couple of ground rules though on this discussion. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. You can do, I thought I was ready for this storm. I was not. Was it Mike Tyson, I think, eloquently put it, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Same kind of thing. So if you were in the storm and maybe you didn't fare as well or something like that, don't feel bad. That goes into the second thing of any landing you can walk away from is a good one. Maybe don't tell that to that Indian guy who just survived that flight. But if you are preparing for these sorts of things and you survive, your family survives, your neighbors survive, it was a good plan. Maybe you need to refine it. Maybe there's things you need to change, but the plan is to keep people safe, keep people fed, keep people, talking out and using the bathroom out the right holes and everything. So if that worked out, that's great. So we go back to September 27th, 2024. This was predicted by the NWS to be a particularly dangerous situation. We have suboptimal radar coverage in Western North Carolina. So really a lot of the rainfall totals and information coming in as the storm was coming in was not amazing. Because we've got KFCX out of Roanoke, KMRX out of Knoxville, and Greenville KGSP out of Greenville, Spartanburg. All of those are pretty far away, more than I'd say 70, 100 miles from us. And despite what you might read on the internet, the Earth is a curved surface. So radar beams, as you get farther out, go shoot higher up in the atmosphere. So we don't really have a lot of good weather kind of information coming in out of that. We had about 8 to 10 inches. I'm in Watauga County, Ash, right on the border of Watauga and Ash. So we had about 8 to 10 inches of rain. We did not get hit as hard as the poor folks in Asheville and Swannanoa, but we did get hit pretty hard. The geography and the geology kind of contributed to the disaster. I'm going to show some footage and photos. So this is right off my front porch as it was coming in. This is Pine Orchard Creek across from my house there. This is my neighbor. He lost his rental cottage. Well, about 6 inches of water in it. We had a lot of trees down. This was about the time we lost power. I don't know why it's chugging. This is a 12th gen Intel laptop with 64 gigs of RAM. It should be able to play a movie. Anyway, so we had some flooding in our area, but I was up on a hill and did okay. I'm thankful of that. This is down the road from us a piece. This building here used to be a restaurant, and it used to be here. It's no longer there. This was a road, and it's gone. This road just got repaved. This van had been relocated 4 miles down the river. So we have a lot of tourism in the area and a lot of these outfitters that take people out in tubes and kayaks and stuff, and most of them lost their entire inventory. This is a road by the New River in Todd, North Carolina, and it had completely flooded. There's a park over here that the buildings had flooded and moved over. This is the Castle Ford Bridge across the New River. I don't know how well you know the area, but this bridge, where our brush truck is sitting, I'm a volunteer firefighter, so we were out assessing stuff that day and helping people. This bridge here is 25 feet above the river, maybe a little more. So the river got up and over the bridge and dumped stuff. Right, Oscar, right, about 25 feet. This is the other side of it. After it cleared, the DOT came through and basically snowplowed this over. That's someone's stove. This was a shipping crate that had just banged into a bridge. Bridge was gone. This is another part of the disaster that people don't really talk about, and I would like to kind of talk about a little bit, is the amount of pollution in the water. When people did get their power back, and a lot of people have wells that got overrun if you live in a lower part, all of this lovely propane, petroleum material, oil was in the water, along with fecal material and the lovely bacterial agents it brings along. One of the guys on our fire department got his power back, fired up, took a big old glass of water out of his well, and spent the next 3 days on the toilet. So that's another thing you have to think about is water safety and preparation. It took us about a month after this to drink out of our well. We paid to have our well tested for the hard, heavy chemicals and all that stuff. But that's another thing to think about, water filtration. This shot's kind of famous. This is in Todd. This tree here is 15, 20 feet above the river. This is a kayak from River Girl Outfitters. It's maybe half a mile up the stream. It washed up and got suplexed into that tree. So it was bad in our area, not as bad as in Asheville. Aggregating factors. There was a few things that made this a worse disaster to deal with. We had heavy rain the previous week. I mean, we had 3 to 5 inches of rain the days before, so the ground was already waterlogged. The creeks were already up. Helene moved fast inland. Usually, when things come up from the Gulf, they kind of rain out here over Georgia. Thank you, Georgia, and South Carolina. And by the time they get to the southern Appalachians, they're a far weaker storm. Helene was trucking it, and so it didn't have time to rain out and weaken and hit the terrain. And so you have the Appalachian Mountains with the Blue Ridge Escarpment. That's a word I like to use, escarpment. We need to bring that one back. It's higher in elevation than the land around it. You get a hot, wet storm, hot, wet thing goes into a cooler air mass. What happens? More water condenses out of it, right? You take your cool glass here from inside the air-conditioned building, and you go out, and it gets wet and sweaty. It's the same thing. So we had even more water squeezed out of this storm. This was before leaf season. We do get, I live on the side of a mountain, and we see 50, 60 mile an hour winds during the winter pretty regularly. I've got a little Davis weather station on my hillside that I put up. That's not uncommon to see somewhere between 40 and 60 mile an hour winds in the wintertime. But in the wintertime, what's missing? Leaves. Leaves are like sails. So you had these leafed out trees that were still there. That pulled down a lot of it. Appalachian culture. That was a problem in the recovery, I would say, because it's a very, we'll say, strong-willed, independent bunch. And when the county is telling you, hey, we need you to go into this holler or down this road and say, make sure everyone's still alive or whatever, and you show up in government unit, volunteer fire departments, pro tip, we're not FEMA, we're not the government, we're a 503c, independent, not-for-profit. You don't have to shoot at us. Some people might have. They aren't happy to see you, and it was also hard to get people help because they were proud. They didn't want to ask for help. They assumed their neighbors had it worse than they did. A lot of people, we are a heavily tourist area, so a lot of people have jobs in tourism and service industry, and so 2 weeks without that going on, and then they go, oh, wait, well, I had food, but now I haven't had a paycheck in 2 weeks, and now I need food. So towards the end of the 2-week period there, we started having people come by and get food more often. But that kind of independent culture of that helped and hampered. It was a pro and a con. Heavily touristed area. I don't know what they do at the beach to get people to move, but people who visit the mountains, don't want to listen to us. Um, and we didn't have any kind of legal framework to make them move. So we have these Airbnbs by the river and stuff like that. Tell you a story. That Thursday when it was hitting, our department went down. There was an Airbnb by the river, and we told them, "Hey, this thing floods if too many people flush their toilet at the same time. You guys need to go." "Oh, we're fine. We moved the cars up the hill. We'll be okay." Friday morning, we go back. Water's starting to come up, and they're like, "Oh no, it's fine." Friday afternoon, last call before the county VHF went out, was a 911 call for a swift water rescue. Water had gotten up, washed their car away, and was flooding into their Airbnb. If the locals tell you, "Hey, leave," leave. If you're ever in that situation, the $50 out of Airbnb is probably not worth it. They survived. Fleetwood Fire Department has swift water rescue boats. We couldn't. They were on the border of our district. We don't have the swift water rescue equipment for that kind of operation, and we couldn't get to them. I mean, there was literally feet of water. And now comes another thing. There was no evacuation. There was no government entity or anything that said, "Hey, if you don't live here, go." If you're a tourist, get your refund from Airbnb or VRBO later. Just get out of here. And so there was a lot of people with no skill set, no knowledge of the area, trying to cross rivers and stuff like that, getting stuck in cars, things of that nature. So those were kind of aggravating factors. The effects. So I live kind of here towards the northern tip. So this is September 28th. We had a wide, you get all this blackout area here, right? So we are kind of here, Watauga County. So we were right on the border. It's really odd. You can see where the storm started to run out of gas. In our area, it was bad, but then if you got kind of to Jefferson, West Jefferson, and north, it started to the storm, Lansing was hit pretty hard, but this wasn't bad. We have family in the Jeffersons, and so we were able to get up there, take a shower and stuff, because they barely lost power up there. It was very, very odd. The first 48 hours or so, we were cut off. The road into Boone was flooded and impassable. The road into West Jefferson was covered in trees and power lines. The power company was like, "Our grid's a mess right now. We don't know what's live and what's not. If you see a power line down, don't touch it. Assume it's charged." And so we couldn't really clear those until they got there, but we could clear trees. We spent a lot of time clearing trees and stuff, and we could clear that. But so we eventually got out to Jefferson and then Boone. That first 48 hours was really the critical thing. We had massive utility outages. Internet was out. Power was out. All that. The Watauga County Dispatch lost their VHF because a fuel line from the generator broke. We have on Rich Mountain, we have a radio repeater for VHF and the ham guys. I'm a ham radio operator too. There's one up there, but the fuel line snapped, and guess what? Nobody had a spare fuel line, and so it was like, that goes down. There was no 911. You called 911 asking for help, they could not dispatch us for about 48 hours. Supply shortages, there was no really easy way in or out of some of these areas, including ours, and so what you had is what you got. Granted, it only lasted 48 hours. What I've learned from between this and COVID, what I've learned about a lot of disasters is civilization is never far away. It seems like it always comes back faster. You don't have to prep like you're going to live in a nuclear bunker for 6 months, but having a few cans of beans and some water on hand for a few days is not a bad idea either. Sudden homelessness. So we had people who lost their home. We had a guy who went to work Friday morning. He was an auto mechanic at a dealership. Work told him to come in Friday morning. He was like, "I'm not so sure." I was at the fire station that afternoon. He stopped in. He's like, "Man, can I stay here? I can't get home." The water rose up and took his road and everything. So suddenly he was without a place to stay until somebody could get that repaired or anything. Search and rescue. We had FEMA sent in urban search and rescue teams with the drones and the IR stuff. So suddenly we were looking for people County has census data, so they're like, there's 6 people live down this road, 12 down this. Can we get a count? Can we know? Because they need to know who's dead, who's alive, kind of stuff. So that's kind of, we spend a lot of time doing that. So the basic approach that I kind of come at this sort of situation with, now that I've set the stage, is ensure your own safety. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And in emergency services, this is my first. I'm a training officer, and what I tell these guys is, do not become part of the problem. You want to run into that burning house and save those people? Great, that's fine. Wait for backup. We don't go 2 in, 2 out. We don't go in by ourselves. If you get down a road and a tree falls behind you and that road starts flooding from the creek or something, you might be able to walk out, but we've just lost $100,000 in gear in the truck and everything. Like, you need to make sure that it is safe for you to operate. Same for you at a personal level. Don't go out looky-looing. Make sure that you're safe. Make sure that you are contained before you can help others. To that degree, the 2 rules in these situations is hide from wind, run from water. If you are in an area where your primary threat is wind from one of these storms, make sure that there are no trees around your house that could fall, that sort of stuff. If you have tarps on hand or something, you can cover a leak in your roof real fast, that's good. Water, you want to run from. If you live in a place where a rain or a mudslide or a creek or something can come up into your house, you want to have a plan to be able to skedaddle real fast. And I'll talk about that later too. So kind of know your options there. Assess damage, needs, and available supplies, like, water, food, shelter. Communications, I would put after that. If you're not eating, if you don't have a place to sleep, don't worry about texting and Facebooking. It should go without saying, but, Gen Z being Gen Z, or maybe that would be TikToking. Sometimes you got to bring that up. So, assess your damage, check in on your neighbors and stuff like that. Make sure that they are covered. Locate others, report status, vendor aid. And this type of organization thing, this is actually kind of important. We had several accounts of the county not getting information or the state not getting information. Somehow that broke down, where we were sending search and rescue. They were sending search and rescue teams up roads that we'd already been up to like 2 times to check on people. And so to make sure that you, check in with your local, if something like this happens in your area, check in with your local fire department or first responders and say, hey, everyone in my house is okay. We're good. Just, you don't have to tell them any personal information. Just say, we're all alive. We're all accounted for. And that saves us from having to hopefully send people up there and check and do a count and stuff like that. Now, don't be afraid to ask for help. Say, hey, we don't have any water. Do you guys have water? Yeah. And then we'll send people with gallons of water your way or something. But we need to know where the people are, right? And help out. That was really the nice thing about this is, people you never talk to. A lot of people who live up in these areas kind of hang out in their hollers and don't really talk to anybody, but during this, man, they would all come out and they'd put a new roof on your house. I see a Samaritan's Purse hat over there. They were, there's Baptists on a Mission. There's a couple other private organizations up there that helped out a lot. But yeah, render aid if you can. The point of being prepared for a thing is not to be like, I've got my castle, screw the rest of you. It's like, hey, I'm safe and taken care of. Can I help my neighbors? Can I make life easier? Can we, keep in touch with our community here? So the 3 technological things that goes into this. Power. I'm going to talk about power, sources, storage, and distribution. I didn't have power at my house for a week, and I was one of the faster ones to get it back. We had people in the county that didn't have it for 2 weeks, something like that. So, having multiple ways. Remember, the golden rule of prepping is one of something is, there you go, none of something. So, got a gas generator, maybe thinking about backing that up with some solar or one of those Blue Eddy or what's the other brand? EcoFlow, Anchor, one of those battery boxes. Communication, wireless voice data. What worked there, what didn't, how I'm changing strategies. Information, storage, and reference. This is a big one. When you can't just Google something and, you've got somebody in front of you who's sick or hurt, and maybe you don't have the medical expertise to know what to do, and help is 30 minutes away, having some kind of way to like look up and go, okay, they are sweating, they're pale. Is this what's going on? Or they, how do I set a tourniquet? Like, what do I do if they are in shock or something? Having a way to have like a quick medical reference, basic stuff, basic training, but some other stuff to go along with that is handy. Handy to have. So let's start with power. Gasoline and propane generators. Solar, battery banks, battery boxes, and efficiency are the things I want to talk about here. And all three of these things work together. So, fossil fuel generators. Again, one of something is none of something. A lot of people buy one of these, they set it in their basement, and then they're like, they never cut it on, they never do maintenance on it, and they, hurricane, snowstorm hits, they pull it out and they set it up, and it don't work. One of something is none of something. Fuel storage and transportation is going to be a problem. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. We had some funny stuff that happened. But you've got to have gas for these things. You got to have some kind of dinosaur squeezing, be it propane, gasoline, diesel, something of that. Propane stays good longer. I prefer the propane ones just because you don't have to drain a carburetor. You don't have to muck around with the carburetor. You just let it run out of propane, unhook the hose, and then you put it back in the shed. Works better. But it can be a problem, and it can be acquiring more fuel can be a problem too in a situation like this. Noise and fumes. And you might think, well, it's an emergency. It's not that big of a deal. After a week of these dang things running on every corner of every street for like, yes, no, those things suck. They are loud. They are noisy. Fumes. You also have to think about, keeping it away from your windows, keeping it ventilated. In the wintertime, we always see people who have these things and they get them too close to their windows and they have a carbon monoxide event. And if you don't have any power, your carbon monoxide detector might not be working. Sir?
One thing that should be noted with those generators is you really need to have spare oil.
Yes.
They need oil changes every 24 hours.
Yep. I'm getting there. Yeah, right there. The service intervals and duty rating. So every one of these doodads, read your manual because they're good for 24, 30 hours, something like that. And you have to change the oil or give it a break or both and do that stuff. Benefits of these, you get a, sir.
For me, after Helene, oh boy, we did not get the smell of gasoline out of our lungs for a good while. Because
yep.
I think about 45% of our neighborhood had generators running, except me. My family was the only one that didn't have a generator running. We lost everything in the fridge and freezer.
Yep. So I would, yeah. He was talking about the smell and the noise there for people online. Yeah, definitely. That's an issue. The nice thing, you do get a high power output per unit of fuel. These things, this dude here will like power every, my refrigerator and my well if I wired it in. Solar battery won't do that without more work. Pretty plug and play. You can, you take these out, fire them up a few times a year to make sure they work, change the oil in them and stuff. But largely people know how they work. They come with the little panel on the side. You could plug things into them. They're pretty, they've got electric start on them. As long as you keep up with the maintenance side of them, they're pretty reliable, pretty idiot proof. So this is 17 5-gallon bucket someone donated us. Full of gasoline. What do you notice about these? Does this say anything on here about approved for gasoline? No. By the time they got them to us, they were leaking. The plastic had melted. So this comes down to the fuel storage problem. You've got to have a lot of gasoline. These things are not that fuel efficient. Some people tried to store things in really bad, dumb ways. We were like smiling, like, thanks for that. And the fire chief was like, we got to do, these was like a bomb. We got to get this away from us. I don't want to shame the people who did it. They were very kind-hearted. They were trying their best. I appreciate the effort, but that's a problem that goes along with these. And please make sure you're using an approved container, especially if you're donating it. Solar and batteries. I really like these solutions combined with a gas generator. I think it's, again, two of something. One of something is none of something. You need to have two of things. These are great. I'm talking specifically about these portable things for emergency situations. You've got solar panels on your house, and you don't have a battery bank in your basement or something. What are you doing? Anyway, do that. So these are great, and these can be had on Amazon. I saw some in Micro Center just around the road yesterday. They're low maintenance. You can pretty much fire and forget these things, and they're so small and portable. You can get these little units here that'll run a refrigerator for a couple hours, and then you take it into town. What we did, my wife and I, when we had some downtime, we drove to Wilkesboro to a coffee shop, had some coffee. I plugged this in under the table and charged it. And I told the owner, obviously, I was like, hey, we're in the thing. He's like, fine. But this is like a power bucket. You can take your battery somewhere, charge it, and bring it back. You can give it to your neighbor, and they don't have to worry about setting up a generator. They just take it and plug stuff in and go. I won't tell you how nice it was, especially when it started getting a little bit humid after the storm, to be able to just plug in a simple box fan on this, and it'll run for hours. No noise, no exhaust, no fuel storage. You don't have to worry about having gas. You don't have to worry about noise. You don't have to worry about exhaust. This is a LifePo 4 battery. If you're getting one of these, I would look for a LifePo 4, because LifePo 4 is like super stable, super good shelf life. Your regular lithium ions are the ones that they had in those hoverboards a few years ago that would catch fire constantly. I would not recommend those. But most of these boxes use LifePo 4. I know the ones from Blue Eddy, EcoFlow, and Anchor do. Do a little bit of research when you buy one, though, just to make sure. These probably do not, especially the solar emergency stuff, probably unless you buy one of the $2,000 big ones, probably don't have a lot of power for like high consumption things. You're not going to be running your dryer off one of these. You're not going to be running your fridge for a long time type stuff. In my opinion, it's best.
Sorry, could you? You said LifePo?
LifePo. It's a lithium iron phosphate is the chemistry. So it's LiFePO 4. Yep. That's the. Yep. They're 12 volts, and you can, if you're crafty, and this is something else I've been wanting to do, is you can get LifePo 4 batteries offline or anywhere. It's just bare batteries, 12-volt batteries, and you can build your own. You can get an inverter to run off of it, so you can so if you're like a ham radio person and you want to build like yourself a little Go box out of that, so you don't have to buy it. The commercial ones are great for like, I have one. They're great for like, I use it for my telescope sometimes, or if you go camping or something, you can throw it in the back of the car. You don't have to think about it. It's packaged, it's got an inverter. But if you want something that's more customizable, yeah, you can get these batteries and build your own thing too. It's best to have with another backup source. So these are great, and the solar is great. Let me tell you, after Helene, it was 2 weeks, sunny days almost. You can make all the solar power you wanted. You wouldn't disturb your neighbors with the noise. But the sun always doesn't shine, so it's good to have. I still think a small gasoline generator. Basically, my idea is you have your battery for your storage, and that battery needs to be able to be charged off of solar or off of gas or off of something else, whatever choice that you have there. So the battery is the bucket, and you just need a way to fill that bucket. Talking about fuel sources. So coffee is important. I'm kind of a coffee snob. I do subscribe to James Hoffman and everything. We could talk about that later. Fossil fuels have other uses too. And if you're not using your generator, you can use propane to cook with on a grill. So, we had a lot of stuff in the freezer. Maybe we couldn't keep it chilled. You can fire up the grill with the propane and you can use it for that instead of power. I made coffee every morning. Guys at the fire department had Cafe Bustelo. They were trying to cook in a pot. It was a disaster. It was worse than Helene. So I usually made coffee and took down there in the morning. Another thing, this thing here, this is a 56-volt Ego chainsaw. We had problems out of nearly every Husqvarna gas chainsaw we had, even though they're maintained and checked. Like the carburetor is getting premixed there for a while was hard. This thing, you can hook it up, charge it, and go. I went through several pretty thick locust logs. That's the 6 or 18. I don't remember the bar size on that one. I should know, it's mine. But and you hook it on the back of a truck, and you're good to go. We cleared a lot of a 3-top road with that chainsaw there after the Husqvarnas on the truck went. So I am a big fan of the electric tools in these. In fact, a lot of rescue departments now are switching away from the hydraulic like Jaws of Life and stuff into the e-tools, and they just run off of these tool batteries, like the DeWalt tool batteries, the Ego tool batteries, the Milwaukee ones, and they're pretty powerful. And again, this is your bucket, and it's so much easier. You know, you don't have to. You can put this in the back of a like Subaru station wagon. You don't have to worry about spilling gas everywhere. You know, they're lighter weight, not that much lighter weight, but you know, people can run them easier. And there's just less to, you know, with a gas chainsaw, you got to pull it out, hope that you didn't put ethanol fuel in it, and it's not gummed up and not going to work. This I have ignored it for 6 months, and then I just plug it in and charge it, and it just works. Yeah, great. So I think, you know, maybe switching the roles of gas and electricity in your life. Another thing I set up for power is, you know, I brought this stuff out to the fire department, and having specifically, I want to point at, so, you know, we had a 12-volt charger here for people who wanted to charge that because we had a backup generator. This was like a ham radio power supply, but I had one of these lab power supplies, and this thing was handy. One of these little electrical, benchtop power supplies that you can charge. If it had a way for me to put a positive and negative in there, I could find a voltage and I could put power in it. And so maybe, you know, people who didn't have a charger for something, like a tool battery or something, you can still do that. So I would recommend, if you have space for it, and these are useful for other things too, if you're a hobbyist, electronics hobbyist, some kind of lab power supply. A word on efficiency. So, specifically in technology, I'm a Linux guy. I have a Linux laptop, but this thing stayed in the bag during that emergency. I have a MacBook Pro M2. That thing, never had to charge it, was great. When every watt counts, Apple wins, and hopefully we get better energy efficient Linux machines. Lower, if you're going to have to use, and you think, well, when you're talking about disaster, well, you need a laptop. Well, communications, documentation, people filling out FEMA paperwork. You need pictures of your stuff. You need a video of your stuff. You're going to have a device to do that. So laptop is something to consider about. They aren't, you know, lower power, no GPUs, something like that, that's going to run off of battery fairly easily. And I said, hopefully in the future we'll have more efficient mobiles. I'm going to get into this more when I talk about the information and reference section, but just to keep in mind, you know, it doesn't have to be your daily laptop, but, you know, maybe go on eBay and get one of these Dell or Panasonic Toughbooks, those Dell, what do they call them? XTGs, ATGs, those like rough, you can get them for like $100, $200, 10 years old, and use them as like your emergency laptop in that situation. Especially if you're rural, that's good because you can have all your documents on there. You have reference keywicks and stuff. But before we get there, let's talk about communications. There are a few major modes of communications that were used in this disaster. We had fiber optic. We got the government grant for fiber optic. I live in the corner of no and where, and I get gigabit to my door. Thanks, Obama. Literally, yeah, that was his doing, or his government. That was that grant, that 2009 thing. Cellular. I don't actually get cell service at my house, but that was a problem because it went down for everyone else too. I was like, oh, it's never worked here anyway. But ham radio, FRS, GMRS, and MERS. These are radio services, kind of VHF radio services, or UHF in that case, similar to ham radio, but different licensing structures. Starlink and other satellite communications we're going to talk about here. Government and commercial stuff. County VHF dispatch was gone. NC Viper was spotty. Our fiber optic ISP stopped working. So I told people, hey, they were like, we thought you had fiber optic. Don't you guys bury cables up there? And I was like, well, yes, but that doesn't help when the ground moved. You know, a lot of these things, the fiber optic was snapped on the side of the road because of the landslide and stuff like that. So that was gone. Yeah. Well, so you know, you mostly get that out of Flatlander people that you know, they're like, they think, well, once you bury cables, you know, if it's not in the tree, if it's not on the pole, then it won't break. But in the hills, you know, the ground moves when it gets too wet, and so it can still fail. Cellular, cellular towers and service route, because a lot of it was either power failure or, what's cellular backhauled into? Fiber. So that was gone too. So this is a stretch of road that we were on then. This wasn't even that bad, but this here is Skyline Sky Best fiber optic cable right there, washed out of the ground. This one wasn't broke visibly, but there were several that we saw that were. So we had places all over the county. I think we got internet. We live on a main road, and we got internet back at 4 or 5 days. Don't quote me on that. I don't know for sure because we didn't get power back for 7. But the fire department had power, and we had. I'm not running my home lab off my generator, and that's also cut the home lab off. It's fine. They got it back in about 4 or 5 days, but there were places up it was months before all of this was fixed. We saw SkyBest did probably second only to Blue Ridge Energy and the people from Duke and stuff they brought up did a fantastic job of getting fiber splicers out there and fixing that stuff. I saw one working. I was kind of like jokingly told the guy, I was like, man, don't bother fixing it. We're better off without that crap anymore. But it was they did a phenomenal job, but that was gone. So that's just an example of, yes, fiber optic cable can wash out of the ground and break. Ham radio, useful-ish. I will say it was useful. So our terrain, I live in a bowl in Todd, and so we have repeaters in Ash. We have WA4J and WY4SB in West Jefferson. I can only hit them with a mobile radio, and this is where I failed. I didn't really have my mobile portable set up. I get on the nets, but I didn't really have it mobile. I have an antenna on my roof, and I was like, it's probably not going to be that bad. And I've got the HTs. HTs, I could listen to the repeaters. I couldn't hit them, and we're in a dead area there. We have the same kind of problem with the emergency at the 151 megahertz stuff. So it was useful-ish, but not quite as useful as it was. And I hear people in Asheville had better times with it. Another thing to consider with ham radio, operators are declining in number. Sadly, hopefully the cam exam changed some of that. Hopefully, maybe we got some more people. So it's not quite as popular as it once was. So if you're sitting there with trying to get somebody on simplex or repeater, you might not be anybody listening. I know in the 12-ish years I've had a license now, 11, 12. I remember when I first got it, I could go up on top of a mountain and do a 2-meter, simplex, CQ, and I get somebody. I do that same thing now. Nobody. Younger operators are mostly interested in digital modes and data and not emergency operation. And I'm painting with a very broad brush here. I'm not saying they're all, but I would say, statistically, I see more in the ham radio community and online and stuff. They will let their computers talk to each other on the airwaves, and they'll get together with each other on Discord and talk about radios. So the demographic is changing. Technical knowledge and licensing make it a non-starter for some people. Most, probably not some. Whenever you key up, you dock. Some people we have, and there's probably some in this room who are operating a radio without a license because they aren't going to give the government their information and all this other stuff. And that's one thing. On the other side of it too, particularly with, I've seen it with young women in this hobby. Every time you key up, you dox yourself. You give your key, they can go on the ULS database and look it up, and they've got your home address. Unless you get a PO box if you get a ham radio license. That's what I have. You guys can't find me on my ham radio license. So that's, particularly for some people, that's kind of a non-starter, especially, I grew up in the age where the phone company mailed everyone a book and had everyone's name and phone number and address in it. Kids these days are a little bit more protective of that. Spectrum might be sold in the future. And I'm not saying it was useless. It's a tool among many. But what I did learn through this is I have another buddy on the department who's a ham radio guy, and he was like, did you know there's GMRS repeaters in our area? And I was like, what? And I started researching it, and it seems like a lot of the people who are doing emergency operations are moving away from ham and moving into GMRS. So now I'm looking more into that as an emergency toolkit thing. So that's something to think about. It's a tool to have, and I encourage people to get into it, especially if you're technically minded, but putting a Yaesu radio in your bag or a Baofeng and saying I'm prepared is yes, ma'am.
If you're looking to get more into the emergency operations side of it, where is the first place you're going to look? Like, say you have your license.
So your local ham radio club, if they do like an Aries net or something like that. So we have both of the clubs in my area have a weekly Aries net where they test the repeater, they test the net procedures and stuff like that. So your local ham radio club would be a place, and most towns have one. Any other ham radio? But there's also there's like a ham radio stuff with the weather service too. You can take some training from them, from Skywarn. And they have like a thing on ham radio a little bit there. But yeah, your local club would be a good place to start. All right. Field day is coming up. Actually, that's a great question. Ham radio, I think it's later this month, but they have RL has a yearly competition where it's an emergency simulation. So you're supposed to take your radio off grid, set it up with solar or a generator or something, and then try to make as many contacts as you can. So get involved, maybe look up your local club to see if they're doing something for ham day and go get some practice and stuff. All right. Satcom, Starlink was the clear winner, and FEMA donated a Starlink. Don't let their mascot take credit for it. And once we got that, the ham radio sat in the corner. Mainly it was, with a ham radio, it's like in an emergency, you don't have to, and I heard some people complain about sad hams being on the repeater going, "You ain't licensed, get off of here." I'm like, this is a life or death emergency situation. Just don't. If you're in a life and death emergency situation, Part 97 or whatever lets you get on a radio even if you don't have a license to get help. So clear the air on that. But even the technical aspect, Starlink. If you can operate a phone app, you can use Starlink, and there's Wi-Fi calling. They gave us a phone and everything. Satcom, who remembers like the old Iridium phone systems and stuff? It used to be horrendously expensive. And Starlink's cheap. And I want to go out on a limb and say I'm an astronomer. I hate Starlink. And this is hard for me to say, but I hate it. But it was super useful. Unless you live in an area where it's your only ISP, it is kind of expensive. I think that they have a plan now where you can like buy their little backpack unit and just do like a month to month so you can use it and then cut it off and then stick it in the corner. Unless you travel for a lot and you have the van life one, you could do that. And other low Earth orbit satellite internet companies are coming online. Look, I think I could say this safely now because I think he's pissed off everyone on every side of the political continuum. But I can understand not wanting to give this company money based on the company. I hate to even call him a CEO, the mascot. But there are other companies coming online. And like I said, I hate it from an astronomy point of view. It is awful. But in this situation, there's no denying the utility. Another thing to consider, iPhone, since I think, 14s have had satellite communications. I think some Androids have it now. So check your phone, and you might be able to send a text. It's more limited. You can only send text messages, but it's still a way. But the nice thing about satellite communications, satellites don't care about hurricanes. Satellite, not an atmosphere. So it doesn't wash out of the ground. Tower won't blow over. I would say, again, this is another tool in the kit. Maybe get together with your local municipal fire department and say, hey, do you guys have a Starlink for emergencies? If not, maybe see if they can get one. If you live in the country, if you have a mutual aid group, commune, collective, whatever, maybe talk about going in together and getting one of these and just having it, the little backpack unit or something for emergencies. We're kind of coming to the end here. So cellular messaging, email, and apps. SMS is no good because you don't get any read receipts. You can't queue it. Like if you're texting somebody, I'm good, it tries to send it now and it doesn't retry. What was the most useful thing for me actually was old-fashioned email. I could sit down at my MacBook, type out an email, drive to town or somewhere to get Wi-Fi, or before the start. Starlink was delivered on like day 4 or something like that. And then, just empty my outbox and email a bunch of people. Second to that was Signal or WhatsApp. I use Signal. WhatsApp is the other one. They're encrypted and they do read receipts. They do delivery. The nice thing about them is they do like a delivery notification. So like you get a check that says this certifiably went to the other person's phone. You know that they got it, whether or not they read it, but you get that. So that's handy. And you can also do the same thing with that. You can sit in your car and tap out a Signal message, then go stand outside the Walmart where they have service and do that and and send it out. So I would recommend getting your personal contacts on one of these. If you have an iPhone, I think iMessenger will do the same thing. I like Signal because it bypasses that whole green bubbles BS, and it's encrypted. And Signal also has a desktop client, so for Linux, so you can use it on your laptop or your desktop. So something like that with some sort of, I really like the idea of having a delivery confirmation that says, I know this, I told this person, I know that they got it, I know it arrived, and whatnot. And if you're trying to send a lot of if you're trying to send a lot of information like pictures and stuff, old-fashioned email. I'm nuts. I still run my own email server. So last thing, and we're coming in kind of hot on time, but information offline. We live in the age of just Google it or just ask ChatGPT. They may not be there. No specialists in your community. So no, who's maybe a doctor or a nurse. No, maybe who's a mechanic. Maybe who's an electrician. Try to find people who know things. Another thing, and this is where I come into I'm kind of looking at a disaster laptop scenario here, is Kiwix. You might say, well, that's still an electrical device. Here's the thing. I like paper books and maps. I still use an atlas sometimes. I still use printed star charts sometimes. If you're having to book it out of your house because the flood is coming, grabbing a laptop bag is a lot easier than grabbing a bookshelf. I'm just putting that out there. Maybe have both. And Kiwix, you can, as a little server that you can download these Zim files for. You can download Wikipedia, you can download MedWiki, you can download cooking information on it, and it lives on your hard drive. They're offline, so if you need something, you can they even have the Arch wiki on this, so you could work. If you have an Arch laptop, you could work on your Arch install while you're bored. Yep, one is none. So have a backup. We've got. SD cards are cheap and, terabyte now. You can back up and stick one in every car and all that stuff. And knowing how to do things versus knowing how to look it up. This is something else I started trying to improve on myself is keeping the information here instead of just, okay, let me look up how to do that. That takes some retraining. But yeah, keep that in mind. I like books and maps. Have some printed copies of stuff, but keep in mind, water and paper don't mix. And if you've got to go, grabbing a laptop bag, taking an old Panasonic Tough Book and hucking it in your thing with your underwear and your socks and heading out the door is a lot easier than trying to figure out, okay, which book do I want to grab? So, all right, can we get your microphone? Sorry.
If you're out of space, remember.
Yeah.
Remember that the laptops it's not laptops, but the phones these days have the capability of handling external hard drives.
Yeah. And you can get terabyte SSDs for Amazon Black Friday. So having that on hand. I'm not a crazy prepper. I'm not got 600 cans of beans and ammo in my thing. I'm not suggesting that at all. But living in a rural area and going through this, having a few of these things on hand, have a buy. When you live in hurricane, how many people live in hurricane country? Every June, July, yeah, the county or the state probably tells you, have your go kit ready, have your flashlights, your water, your documents, and a place where you can get out if you need. It's the same idea here as what I'm advocating, is having a plan, testing that plan, testing your radios, testing your generators, making sure it all works, go camping, play with it. Try it out, see how it does. And because if the better prepared you are, the more useful you are to your neighbors and your community, and the less that, the more that everything can kind of get back to normal faster. I will say, this has really made me doubt the doomsday scenario that everyone seems to be fixated on. Even if things get bad, civilization is not far behind. People are coming to help. You just have to make it through a few days usually. So medication's another thing. Yeah, that's one thing I forgot to bring up. We had a lot of people who had meds or stuff that, it's like, oh crap, I'm out of it. If you're diabetic, have a way to keep those chilled. I know the insulin doesn't keep, so or maybe evacuate. So if you're in danger there. But that's kind of all I got. We're short on time, but any questions? Thank you.
So I live more in the Spartanburg area. I know a lot of people here are probably in Western North Carolina. I don't know if anyone here ever felt hurricane force winds from Helene. I know I did in Spartanburg. I managed to cap a gust of 88 miles per hour over in central Spartanburg County. Uh, it was absolutely horrible there. Right after 8 a.m. when the peak winds had came, me and my mom went off in my papa's Ford Explorer and a Ranger. We went off to 540 near, I think it's in near Pauline. We had to deal with a dog kennel whose aluminum roof had been ripped off, and all the dogs were still in there. It was absolutely horrible that day. I genuinely don't know what y'all had to deal with in Western North Carolina, but all I know is that I'm grateful that Spartanburg or Greenville wasn't turned into an island. We got about at most a foot of rain.
Yeah, thank you. We had, like I said, I count myself as very lucky. I mean, the fact that I'm able to sit here today and just complain that the internet didn't work, my house survived. We had like some minor earth movement and some like tree limbs in our yard. But there are people in our area that lost everything. So yeah, but yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Gentleman in the back, please. Thank you.
Yes, I'm in Crumpler. We were without power maybe 10 days.
Mhm.
And with the generators, we were able, like people from the outside, like you said, showed up with generators and gas. But I saw a lot of unsafe stuff around like hooking up generators to homes. And
Yeah.
like the homes that were pre-wired correctly did very well.
You're talking about the forbidden cable? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe some things are left unsaid
Yeah.
in emergencies, but
You can, so yeah, that's not advised, but you can make a double-ended dryer cable, and yeah, I would not, get a transfer switch. You can if you don't have enough sense to cut off your main breaker before you do that. No, yeah, that's that. Even then, you could fry. You can forget. Your kid can cut it back on. You could fry a lineman. It's not. Yeah. Get a transfer switch. It's we had people offering to install them for free in our area after the storm. So yeah. Any other questions? Guy in the front here.
Getting my steps.
That's okay.
So, just as a quick question, did you have to deal with any casualties that you had to go through? Because I know in Western North Carolina it was bad. I heard that almost the entirety of what was it, Chimney Rock Village had been wiped out.
That's a good deal south of us. I personally didn't have to deal with anything in our area. I do know of a couple of ones that were found north of us and then south of us. A couple of people caught in a flood with a car, and then a couple of people caught in a landslide. But me personally, no. I think there's a tree that fell on someone's house too and squished them. But me personally, no. There was some in our area. A lot of that number was clouded over the year again because of the tourists. It's like, well, so and so from Raleigh was up there and there wasn't a resident, so it just took a lot of it was just fog of war kind of stuff on that. So, all right.
And yeah, could you go back to that second slide that featured the satellite loop of Hurricane Helene?
Yes. Let me see here. Probably need to skedaddle here soon because I guess the next group has to come in. I guess I could just yoink. One more. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I feel the need to kind of point out, with the National Weather Service considering what they said regarding Hurricane Helene, we were like in the upstate of South Carolina, we were predicted to get maybe 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that was about it. But that didn't stop me from getting an 88-mile-an-hour gust. So anytime we have a tropical storm or any sort of thing that's supposed to go through here from now on, take their warnings more seriously than their warnings say.
Yes, it's so when they say particularly dangerous, so weather forecasting is always a thing, is always kind of you're modeling things. It's a little bit of guesswork in there. Well, not guesswork, but sophisticated models. And a storm going, it's a 400-mile wide storm. If it goes 25 miles to the east, the effects are going to be way different. It's hard to forecast something that that discreetly. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna kind of end here, but I appreciate everybody, and yeah, thank you.